BSides DC would like to thank all of our sponsors, and a special thank you to all of our speakers, volunteers, and organizers for making 2018 a success.
First of all, thanks everybody for being here. I hope you've had a great con here at BSides DC. I'm Cheryl Biswas. I'm your friendly Canadian neighbor to the north. You're all welcome north of the border anytime. All right, I'm also very proud to be a founder of the Diana Initiative, and we champion women and diversity in tech, and we just had our second event in Las Vegas this summer. You can also find me online as Encrypted. We all know what this is, but you can say it with me if you want. The views and opinions expressed herein are those of the presenter only and do not represent those of any employer, past or present, and now my employer is much happier. Okay, let me show you our agenda for today as we explore what is an evolution of evil, because there are many stories to be told. We'll question our choices around IoT. We'll take a look at who's out there. We'll talk about miners and money. And then we're going to play a little game of what if. Now, botnets aren't something that's new. They've been around for a while, but they have been steadily evolving. They're well past the point of being an annoyance or an inconvenience. They've moved into the enterprise realm, and they have the capability there to do a lot more damage. I work in threat intel, so my job is to track the trends and to identify things that could potentially cause business risk or harm the bottom line. So for me, there was no question out of the gate in January this year when I noticed massive botnets and crypto miners. I thought that that was attention worthy. The thing is with business, it's not a problem until it's a problem. And so things suddenly changed around June with VPN filter, and I found myself staying up all night working on a very important report on this new trend of botnets. We can all agree it is not a new trend. However, it's now the end of October. As I see things, botnets pose a clear and present danger. We need to look past what it is we think we know, because something wicked this way comes. So let's get started. Typically, when we talk about botnets, we think of distributed denial of service, DDoS campaigns. So it's an inconvenience, and we'll get over it, right? Well, let's talk more about that inconvenience around DDoS. How many people here use GitHub? Okay, so you remember what happened back in February of this year to GitHub. The biggest DDoS attack recorded happened to GitHub, 1.35 terabytes. That was actually twice the size of Mirai. Now looking at that, Mem crashed wasn't actually a botnet. However, it was a bunch of misconfigured servers that could be made into a botnet. And we've got a lot of those servers that are internet facing that shouldn't be. And they live in enterprises that don't seem to know about them. Because we've got this ongoing problem with shadow IT, but that's another talk. So, how do I know? Well, I had to go looking for them. I have two words for you, okay? Asset management. Yes. When it is done right, asset management is going to save your ass time and again. You can quote me on that one. Done the way I have seen it, you are going to get hit. So I'm going to illustrate this point with the misconfigured memcached servers that were accessible via public internet. That's a very important statement. Accessible via public internet. Because the predecessors were Mongo and Couch databases. And I'm pretty sure some of you last year saw what happened to a whack load of those when they got totally pwned by ransomware. And you can see how well that lesson was applied here. And it's only going to keep happening. So by way of a quick explanation for people who may not know or be familiar with the term of memcache, because I certainly wasn't, it's all about helping to boost the response time for database-driven websites. And it's a memory caching. So what you've got here is a default insecure configuration. And we have experienced a number of major issues around insecure default configurations. We understand this very well. In this case, it allowed for a DDoS attack by using the UDP packets that were amplified by these servers, and amplified in terms of 51,000 times. It enabled the attackers to use fewer resources. It greatly escalated the scale of the attack. I'm going to assume that everybody knows what the CIA triad is, right? Confidentiality, integrity, availability. So it's really easy to understand this in terms of availability and its impact to us. But what if these attacks by botnets were able to impact the other two sides of the triangle? So Martin McKay is the global security advocate at Akamai, and I know a lot of enterprises use Akamai. And he said this, that a lot of countries don't even have 1.3 terabits coming in. So if you had an attack leveraged at a country that didn't even have that level of resource, you would see them go offline for a considerable length of time. Yeah, you knew this was coming. All right. Imagine a zombie apocalypse of crockpots. I'm not kidding. Oh my God, we connect everything to the internet. This is the connected hell of IoT, where set it and forget it really is the best practice. So, default passwords. They're de rigueur. Embedded system vulnerabilities are everywhere. And we haven't even factored in what is a veritable tsunami of unsecured connected devices being acquired within the developing world. So botnets a few years ago were used by script kiddies who were playing the Grinch at Christmas time and just, owning Xboxes and PlayStations. But now, well, now we've got bigger kids to worry about. And the attacks have taken on a whole new meaning because botnets have become one more weapon in a digital arsenal for the games that nation states play. There's no referees and there's no playbooks. So we've now experienced the impact of DDoS botnets built from hundreds of thousands of Internet of Things devices, compromised, and they represent a rapidly expanding attack surface for us. Problem is, it's consumer driven, so the race to the finish line doesn't even let security be an afterthought. And there's very little incentive for manufacturers to do things better. And how do we even begin to regulate this? Okay, put up your hand if you want to be a regulator. You do? Okay, we'll single you out afterwards. All right, and at the beginning of this month, another 9 million inherently insecure devices got added to the botnet trough. It's not really the devices in IoT botnets that are unmanaged. This is per Jeremy Connelly of FireEye. But it's that things are just left out there, untended, not updated. And the problem is a non-technical average user just thinks it's a glitch when in essence they have no idea they are being compromised. So how about this? Botnets that are built to download other botnets. That's wicked. and actually that is Wicked, which is a botnet that has downloaded Omni, Owari, and Sora, which are all spawn of Mirai. So what we've got here is virtually, quite literally even, a playground for attackers with botnets and aspirations. So if they don't see the limits to their creations, we should not limit our expectations of attacks. We all know by now what happens when source code is made public. And there are numerous variants of Mirai and Satori out there. But we need to start thinking hybrid, because there's source code out there as well for Trojans, ransomware, and other interesting exploits. I'm going to let this one speak for itself. By chance, does anybody follow Bob Rudis? He's with Rapid7. He does a lot of interesting posts on Twitter with regard to data science and botnets, and he's put some interesting, scary stuff out there this past year. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about who's out there. I would say that Mirai was the pivotal moment. How many people here remember the fall of 2016 when the East Coast went down? There was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, there was pretty much no internet, and Dyn got DDoSed. I want you to take a very good look at this map, because this is what I believe it looks like when botnets as a weapon happen. But this is actually just stage 3 of that Mirai attack back in 2016. And the cost to businesses in downtime was significant. These are some of the major botnets since Mirai. This is where it pretty much all happened for me. I'm going to say it incorrectly, but SMOMINRU. So this is when I perceive botnets pivoting from DDoS and spam to monetized attack vectors. SMOMINRU was a giant mining rig, one of the biggest and most successful cryptojacking botnets that were active. And as we've seen this past year, botnets and crypto mining go hand in glove. It netted $2.3 billion, and it leveraged Eternal Blue so that it could find and enslave more of the devices. But in this case, it learned how to evade sinkholes. Also, it used the Windows Management Infrastructure, WMI, to help manage and configure more mining bots. And this wasn't something seen up to this point in other miners. Hide and seek. Is anybody familiar? Has anybody been following the development of botnets over the past year? Okay, these ones are intriguing. That's why I'm presenting them to you, because you really will see the evolution of sophistication and capability and why we should really be worried. This one emerged in January. It was only the second botnet to have peer-to-peer architecture versus conventional command and control. Peer-to-peer enables it not to be tracked. So it also comes with a worm-like spreading mechanism for rapid infection. And it differed from the other botnets out there in terms of its complex features and its constant redesign. Because why just DDoS when you can do data exfil, code execution, and tamper with device operation? This is a bot that's going places. So in May, it came back with even more. One magic word: persistence. And this, my friends, is a game changer. Because before this, you could just turn it off, turn it back on, and flush it out of your systems. Not anymore. Then, in July, they added database servers. There's a reason why I brought up Mongo and Couch. We've got a bad history with servers and internet exposure and online susceptibilities. But no, there's more, because in September, they added the capability for Android devices. And we all know there is a truckload of those out there, and they're not secure. MiloBot. This one's interesting. This is an attack bot. It was designed for malware versus malware wars, and it can hunt and disable malware on the targets. It surfaced from the dark web, I'm not surprised there, back in June, and it displayed an unheard of level of complexity. This is an ongoing theme for this year, with various tools and evasion tactics. Note the anti-VM, anti-sandbox, and anti-debug up there. Yes, but even better, its internal parts are wrapped with a lovely encrypted resource file. Now, in addition to the ability to hide itself well, it's multi-purpose, multifunctional, so it could do code injection, but it also does something called process hollowing. Has anybody heard of the term process hollowing? Do you want to give me a quick explanation?
It's able to inject itself into another running process, basically, that would also encrypt that. It's like a evasion technique.
Right. So if a bot had this, would you be worried about it? Yeah, me too. Okay. Now the malware comes in 3 layers, and each layer is responsible for executing the layer that comes after it. The final layer uses reflexive EXE technique. So essentially it's running EXEs in memory. None of this stuff is really happening on the disk. And we all know that if you do stuff from memory, you're not being able to track it or trace it. So MiloBot can be used to download whatever its bot herders want. If you're thinking ransomware, if you're thinking crypto mining, if you're thinking banking Trojans, spyware, anything. Did everybody get that FBI notice in June? Oh my God, 500,000 Soho routers across 54 countries. Now this malware strain, it's incredibly complex compared to the other stuff out there, but for good reason, because we know that it is nation state driven. And this is the second bot that was equipped with support for persistence, remaining after it was rebooted. And I hate to say this, but a lot of people believe that we haven't kicked it. It is still thriving out there, despite of what the FBI had said, if we can detect it and we can clean it. A lot of people believe those infections are still valid. So what this one does is it scans for SCADA components, and it has a function that will wipe the firmware and incapacitate affected devices. It sounds a little bit like Stuxnet for good reason. Cisco Talos did a series of fantastic blogs with their research on this, and they identified code overlap with black energy. And if you're not familiar with black energy, that's the code that was used behind the attacks on the power grids in the Ukraine in 2015 and 2016. So in September, Talos stated that this malware was still being developed and enhanced. So it's new and improved with 7 third-stage modules. It's got port forwarding. It's got a SOCKS 5 proxy, and it's got a reverse TCP VPN on the infected devices. From Russia, with love. And I'll wrap this section up with Mirai. This is the latest evolution in weaponized botnet experiments. Yes. This one offers wide coverage for multiple CPUs. Now, while that happens to be common for Mirai variants, what's interesting here is this is the largest amount of variants seen to date. It is a massive number. The security researcher who caught the sample found that it was tunneling through Tor, and everybody understands, I'm sure, that Tor is the onion router network, so that you can't be detected, hence its name. This botnet goes after systems with telnet exposed, oh yeah, and weak credentials. Who'd have thought? Apparently there's a lot of them out there though. It determines what the system is, And then it will use several versions of the same command to ensure payload delivery. Backups on its backups, quite literally. And this botnet is lucky number 3 to achieve persistence after reboot. So we've got 3 of them out there. Yes, it runs 6 methods concurrently to ensure that it gets loaded and stays running. You actually can kick it off, but you have to restore back to default settings. I don't believe that I don't know if that works for VPN filter, but it does in the case of Tori. So my point here is, nobody knows what the heck this bot was designed for. Typically, they're engineered either for crypto mining or for DDoS capabilities. The researchers have said they can't find any indication of either of these. We need to expect the unexpected. Okay, so who here works in FI? All right. Account takeover, or ATO, has been a massive issue for our section this past year, just because of the numbers. Attackers use botnets and in mass efforts so that they can get malicious logins. Per Akamai, it went from 3.2 billion from January to April to 8.3 billion from April through May. This is called credential stuffing. So botnets go across the internet to steal login information en masse. And the fact is, every business, not just FI, is at risk. It's a huge cost to financial organizations, and it has become an increasing battle to fight. There's days when the bank sites are just absolutely hammered, and we look at our logs and the spikes are massive, showing the attempts to get in. Botnets. It looks like a DDoS attack, but it's much, much worse. So here's the hitch. Mitigation impacts user experience. We are all answerable to our customers. So if our customers complain that they cannot access their accounts or that things are slow, mitigation is going to be compromised. What we've learned through our exercises is that botnets are now going undetected when they make their attack methods by going low and slow. We can't hear them. They're much stealthier. And then they get to infect multiple FIs or multiple enterprises and stay in the game. So this is our life, botnets and Trojans. It's a marriage made in heaven, too. I'll talk through a few of them with you just to get you familiar with what we're seeing. Black botnet happens to be a proxy botnet. Why is this important? Again, it's so that you can go undetected. You've got a relay or a chain of proxies. We know sock puppets and proxies from other things in terms of security. Same with botnets. You can't follow them, you can't track them. This one is delivering the Ramnet banking Trojan. It's been taken down by law enforcement at least twice, so this is its latest, greatest enhancement. In March, we had the Gozi banking Trojan being delivered via the Dark Cloud botnet. And Dark Cloud works very well at delivering several families of malware. So this botnet's appeal comes through how it's using an army of hijacked computers and changing the DNS frequently, as much as 287 different DNS addresses just across a 24-hour period. Again, it's very hard to track this. You may have heard of the Necker's spam botnet. That's a big problem for every enterprise, but it took a major pivot in August of this year, specifically going after banking employees through a bunch of spam emails and delivering flawed AMI-RAT. And I'll end last but not least with Emotet. Emotet is a huge issue for FI. So its growth over 2018 has been to comprise about 59% of all identified malware. And it's become a multi-purpose threat so that it too is a delivery service vehicle for other malware. It's gone on to spawn QuackBot, which targets FI as well as brokerage houses. And QuackBot utilizes PowerShell and Mimikatz, because we all know the value and meaning of living off the land. So if 2017 was about ransomware, 2018 has been all about crypto miners. There have been some very notable pivots from individual machines up to enterprise systems. Now, this is not about Bitcoin and Monero themselves, but it's about what it takes to mine them, because miners are resource intensive. They devour CPU and power. So that's the move behind enterprises, especially data centers or cloud services. All of those servers and all of that power, yum, crypto miners dream. And it's a lot easier to go to those places where they expect high usage of those particular things. You're far less likely to be detected. In the event that it gets detected, crypto miners will be flagged typically as a PUA, or a potentially unwanted application. And I hate to say it, but very often not much gets done in those cases because they're lower ranking, they're not identified. People go after what they know, and they persist. My concern is the use of exploits like Eternal Blue that are now getting combined with ready and available exploits on vulnerable enterprise systems. Case in point would be the Oracle WebLogic server. Does anybody here use Oracle in your environment? Okay, so there was a critical vulnerability identified earlier this summer. In 2 days, a proof of concept had been distributed across Pastebin and GitHub, and it was being actively exploited. So, not only do we have to watch for things like that, we also need to watch for an open source exploit tool known as JEXBoss. And this is going after vulnerable JBoss servers. This is enterprise environment. And the reason I bring this up is we saw a very, very similar kind of attack against this particular group of servers in 2016 with the ransomware attacks. That's the massive spike. Symantec blocked 8 million attacks in December of 2017. Zscaler says that at one point, attackers were trying to compromise 30% of vulnerable systems across the globe in a 24-hour period. Bless you. But even if your systems are patched, you can still be at risk. You're at risk to the browser-based attacks, and this is an area where considerable growth has taken. And the barrier for entry is low. In June, Prowly Botnet infected 40,000 web servers, plus modems, plus IoT devices for crypto mining. And it redirected users to malicious sites. It leveraged multiple vulnerabilities, and it brute forced credentials in order to gain access. Victims were infected with a Monero miner and then the R2 worm in order to allow this to propagate and expand the botnet. In addition to this, it went after CMS platforms that were running websites and installed a backdoor. Now, when you hear Apache struts, you should know it's bad. Equifax bad, right? But no, actually gets worse because I will now add the magic words, Eternal Blue. Zealot offers new attack vectors. It automatically delivers malware on internal networks via web application vulnerabilities. And it exploits Apache struts. It uses Eternal Blue and, the other infamous NSA tools cache to propagate internally in your networks. And then, at the heart of it all, are easily compromised routers. And what is the router of choice? MIKROTIK. And that just went from bad to worse because they leveled it up to carrier-grade routers. We're 5 months in, and the attackers are still finding more ways to pwn even more routers. We did have somebody out there attempting to go and patch these routers, a sort of reverse vigilante. All right, so the fact is, attacks evolve. Where could attackers go with this? What happens when they level up to nation-state capabilities and that bag of tools and tricks? Because the devices that make up armies here don't need to be sophisticated, and the attackers are definitely winning with quantity over quality. And just how much damage do we think that weaponized botnets could do to our environments? Just given this talk, we could estimate their capacity to create an extensive outage or deliver malicious payloads. But what is it that we're not taking into consideration that attackers could potentially leverage next? As we know, most botnets have tasks to fulfill. That means they need to call home, and usually that will reveal the command and control servers, which has allowed us to track them down. I present to you the next pivot. What if they don't have to call home? And what if they just have one job? Go forth and propagate. So what we're talking about here is a wormable botnet, self-propagating and leveraging some of the best available exploits out there like Eternal Blue and Friends. No human required. Up until now, we've seen botnets as something that's been monetized for crypto mining and just to have a very modicum level of control in terms of a DDoS attack. But then there was Mirai, and Mirai was used as retribution in targeted attacks, first against Brian Krebs, but then leveled against a major ISP in France. When DDoS became a weapon, it was no longer just an outage. So I want to talk a little bit more about what it means in terms of wormable and self-propagating by looking at some worms that have left their mark in history. Michelangelo, damaging. It overwrote the hard drive and the master boot record. Stormworm was massive, and the infected machines just continued growing and snowballing. Morris worm, while it started off as a host, this was rapid and far-reaching. Think of how that could affect us today, because an instigator wasn't even able to get it under control as much as they wanted to. Talk about cost. Code Red, both 1 and 2. These were the most expensive in terms of the damage that they caused. We're looking at $200 million a day. For long-lasting, you can't beat Conficker. This resides in the land of SCADA and ICS, and it is the bane of their existence because it goes on to perpetuate older, unpatched systems. And it's averaging, believe it or not, 2 million new infections yearly. And last but not least, for sophistication and nation-state capability, there's Stuxnet. This is a very recent worm going after Android. It has the potential makings of a perfect storm because there's also a Metasploit module for exploiting and rooting Android devices via port 5555 in an automated and a scripted manner. So this is a misconfiguration issue that actually poses a clear and present danger for any Android device owners. Which leads me to ask, from an attacker's perspective, which botnets would you pick and why? I definitely go with hide and seek, not just because of the persistence, but because it's been constantly upgraded and customized with its tool set. Absolutely, Milobot. It's an attack bot. It's built for evasion. It's got layers. It avoids detection. We've got VPN filter. Nation-state capabilities built right in. Zealot is malevolence, pure and simple. And look what it leverages. Living off the land means you don't get detected. And finally, Torai. Because now we're going into the realm of utilizing Tor, but also all of those platforms, you know, uncharted territory. So what do you get when you combine unpatched vulnerabilities, existing nation-state exploits, millions of enslavable, inherently insecure devices, and self-propagating malware? What if you could add to that time delay? Being able to evade notice and make less noise. And then leverage multiple attack methods based on operating system. Oh, and establishing persistence. And the cherry on top, it's all automated. Let's have some fun with this now. Okay, I'm really not as technical as most of the people here. So this should serve as a fair warning since we talked about lowering the bar for entry with botnets. All right, where to start? Oh my God, you can YouTube anything. I found this, the Botnet Bible, but I didn't feel like parting with $25. I love you all, but not that much. So I made a to-do list. Botnet Herder's standard business plan appears to be using exploit kits and then getting somebody to click on a link to drop that payload. All right, so what we know is design. We need to use peer-to-peer because we don't want to get detected easily, and we know that they can track us through conventional command and control. Well, we definitely need a good hosting surface, a bulletproof one, preferably in Russia. We have to build something called a stub. That is our infecting file. Then we need to buy a cryptor for that stub. It's better to buy it because there are people who that is their whole purpose is to be excellent at encryption. We don't have to be good at all the things, right? We know that. You can buy that and that'll help us evade detection. And then we know this, we need to find a vulnerability that affects lots of devices, like a router. And we're going to need a rat because a remote administration tool is essential here. I didn't really want to go play down in the dark web, so I stuck to the surface web, and you can find loads of stuff on Pastebin. You really can. This is just a selection of some of the bulletproof hosting providers out there. I took a look at one. This is the clientele that you're going to find. I'd like to point out things like GPON Loader and QBot. Oh, and we talked about this earlier. JexBoss, vulnerability scanner. As you can see, there's some really high-end clientele on these. If you're looking for it, you'll probably find it through your bulletproof hoster. Now we also know we need a cryptor for our stub. I went and looked on hack forums, and you can see there's an excellent selection of cryptors available. We want to be able to bypass conventional AV signature detection. I looked at an offering from NightCrypt. It looks like it has an actual terms of service, but it's also all about being able to run on a variety of Windows platforms. You don't have to run on Windows, but I know Windows, so that's what I'm going with. And it already offers us a private stub. So we've covered 2 points here. We've got our stub and we've got the cryptor for it. Please note, I do not know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm happily building a botnet here. All right. How do you build a rat? Oh my gosh. Well, I watched a few YouTube videos. I'm not sharing those with you. I will tell you that this one literally was idiot-proof. Me being the idiot, and it walked me through how I would configure the ports on my firewall and router so that I could actually run this. If I can do it, think about who else could do this. Who doesn't have my ethics? Okay. What are we going to use for our botnet code? Again, I found lots of stuff. GitHub has a great variety of things. Pastebin will often actually redirect you to GitHub to find more of the code. So I went looking and I found this one, UFONet. It's UFOs, it's got to be fun, right? And it looks really straightforward and simple, which actually it is. And if you want to just build a botnet for free, you follow the instructions online. Zombies and droids and aliens, but it's really straightforward. It's scary simple. You follow the instructions, you build your botnet, and you're ready to go. Remember we talked about finding a good vulnerability that goes after a lot of devices? This happens to be a router vulnerability exploited through the Hajime botnet. One of many choices you can find online for free. Now, if you wanted to upgrade your source code, there's Mirai, there's Satori, or there's Sora, which is particularly nasty. But you could cut and paste snippets of this code that's online to enhance what you've already got there. And last but not least, don't forget your coin miners. Well, yes, this is far from over, but my talk pretty much is. So, yes, to wrap it up, we need to keep very close watch over specific ports because you know that the attackers are. Keeping up to date on security patches, the proof is in the pudding here. You know what they can build in terms of exploits, you know how, and you know why, because they know we're not up to date. And the move into enterprise should be very scary for all of us. We're far more vulnerable than we realize. I'll be posting this talk, so I'll have some of the resources available from a great many people I've read. I won't post the links from Pastebin and GitHub for understandable reasons. And that's it from me. Are there any questions? Yes?
How on earth do you get anyone to care? The move towards crypto miners and the users aren't impacted, even your large companies, you're hitting a data center, they're already paying for that power, their space and cooling, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what it's going to take to keep those things up to date and keep things securely patched. And a destructive thing, until it hits, again, it's going to seem better for the enterprise to just let that be there until it gets patched out naturally. Like, how do you motivate anyone to take this seriously?
Okay, so the question was, how do we make people care, especially when it hits enterprise systems where it's a drop in the bucket, essentially? That has been our job as security people, is, you know, acting as canaries in coal mines and sounding an alarm time and again and feeling on a regular basis defeated because we can't get the message across. I don't know. I really don't. Like I said earlier, for business, it's not a problem until it's a problem. When it hits you in the bottom line, when your reputation and brand are at stake, I have seen the people who make the decisions sit up and take notice. I think, honestly, the best thing that we can do is what we are really good at doing, which is we say to hell with it and we secure this anyway because we actually know what's coming. And it's just our nature to do the work that nobody else is doing because we know what's going to come further down the line, and it impacts everybody. We get caught up in it just as much as the guys in the suits upstairs who really don't understand what this is going to play out like. Does that answer your question somewhat? Okay. Did you have a question? Yeah.
So you mentioned, I think some other people read that article about the guy who's going in and patching those MIKROTIK routers. Do you think that that's like a viable way to sort of combat these, is to actually have something that's going out there in an automated fashion, sort of like closing these vulnerabilities?
Wow, I have, so the question was, is it a good idea to have somebody similar to the white hat vigilante who was going out and patching the vulnerabilities on the MIKROTIK routers doing this automatically? I follow a podcast called Darknet Diaries, and they talked about a botnet from 2012 or so. It's a fascinating story. I would actually encourage everybody to listen to it if you can, because it's a really good lesson about what you'll discover out there and how there are attackers and there are bots that go and patch each other. Some of them do it in the case of making it stronger for their own opportunities. But I would really like to say, if we had a kind, altruistic source that could safely automate identification and patching of these routers to make that possible, it would help all of us. It is an enormous job, and it's something that we can't rely on individuals or even enterprises to do well.
Right, I mean, the follow-on is, like, you mentioned regulation and, like, potential, like, is this a role that some government needs to take on? Because you mentioned, like, if one of these botnets goes after a country, it could completely shut down the country. So we're potentially, if nation states are going to be using these as weapons, maybe other nation states need to, like, diffuse the weapons, if you will. Does that make sense?
Okay, so the question is, should we put this into the hands of a government to manage? I'm going to back down on that one, and I'm going to say no, because it can become a very dangerous double-edged sword. I don't want to give any government that degree of ability or power, as much as I think we need to have a bigger body regulating this and taking it on. It's a great question. Any other questions? Yes.
Assuming you execute your to-do list through to fruition, how many boxes do you come?
I can't say from a real experience. The question was, if I had followed my to-do list to fruition, how many boxes could I pwn? While it's all theoretical, it's based on documented evidence of what attackers before me have gone and done. I expect there would be some mistakes and some misfootings, but I could reliably, given that this is, if I inject my code with Mirai and I use a really good and available router on it, I could go after thousands. And I would probably leverage at least a couple of scanning sources across the internet that we're very familiar with to be able to identify them and flag them. I'd also probably be very interested in investigating what's available in terms of pawnable servers right now. Does that answer your question? Okay. Am I done? All done. Okay, thank you so much, and happy Halloween, everybody.